had always trusted him. For over 30 years, he had been the man I married, the father of our children, the man who promised me we would grow old together. I never once doubted him. Not once. Even when he started working late more often, I convinced myself it was just the demands of his job. He had been climbing the corporate ladder for years, and I was proud of him. But as the months went by, I began to notice small things, things that didn't add up. At first, it was just a passing thought in my mind. He'd come home late, smelling like coffee and office paper, claiming that the new project at work was demanding extra hours. But as the weeks passed, his absences became more frequent. Then there were the strange phone calls, the ones he'd take in the other room, speaking in hushed tones, always making sure the door was closed behind him. I told myself that maybe it was work-related. After all, he had a reputation to maintain. But it wasn't just the late nights or the secretive phone calls. It was the little things, like his phone, which always seemed to be out of reach. He'd keep it face down on the table or in his pocket, always guarding it like it was something precious. He became increasingly defensive if I ever asked to see it or if I made a comment about his behavior. "Why are you so suspicious?" he would ask, his voice rising slightly, as though I had crossed a line. I brushed it off, convincing myself it was nothing. Maybe I was just being paranoid. But a small seed of doubt had been planted in my mind, and no matter how much I tried to ignore it, it grew. One night, when he was late again, I found myself staring at the kitchen counter, the house silent except for the hum of the refrigerator. My hands were shaking slightly as I wiped down the counters, my mind racing. Why was he really working late so often? What was going on? I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. That's when I saw it, the phone. His secret phone. It had always been there, tucked away in his desk drawer, hidden behind old paperwork and receipts. I had never thought to look before, but that night something inside me urged me to open it. I slid it out, my heart pounding in my chest, my palms sweaty against the cold screen. The moment I unlocked the phone, I felt a sense of dread wash over me. There were messages, dozens of them, messages from someone named Sophie. The name was unfamiliar to me and my heart skipped a beat. The messages were innocent at first, just casual chats about work. But as I scrolled further, the tone of the messages changed. There were flirty texts, jokes about private meetings, and even pictures, intimate pictures that made my stomach churn. My hands trembled as I kept scrolling, unable to stop myself. I could feel my entire world crumbling with every new message I uncovered. I had been so blind, so trusting. How had I never noticed? How had I not seen this coming? I stared at the screen for what felt like hours, the truth slowly sinking in. He had been lying to me. All those late nights, all those strange phone calls, they had been to her. Sophie. The name echoed in my mind, ringing louder with every passing second. I thought of the vows we had taken, the life we had built together, and here I was, staring at the evidence of his betrayal. My heart felt heavy, like it was being crushed under the weight of the truth. He had been unfaithful, and I had no idea. I had given him everything, my love, my trust, my life, and this was what he had done in return. I didn't know what to do next. Part of me wanted to confront him right then and there, to scream, to cry, to demand answers. But another part of me felt numb, like I was frozen, unable to move. I couldn't believe it. My husband, the man I thought I knew, had betrayed me. I wasn't sure what hurt more, the fact that he had been lying to me or the realization that I had been so blind to his deceit. As I sat there, staring at the phone, my mind raced with thoughts of what to do next. Should I confront him now? Should I wait until he came home? I felt a strange calmness begin to settle over me, a cold clarity that told me I needed to get the truth out of him. But first, I had to be sure. I had to know everything. So I scrolled through the messages one last time, memorizing every word, every detail. It was time to take control of the situation. No longer would I be the clueless wife, the trusting woman who had been deceived. I would uncover the truth, no matter the cost. The next morning, I couldn't shake the heaviness that lingered in the pit of my stomach. I barely slept the night before, my mind racing with the images from the phone, the messages, and the feeling of betrayal that was eating away at me. When he came downstairs, just like every other morning, with his usual smile and casual greeting, I couldn't bring myself to look at him the same way. He was the man I had trusted with my heart, my life. How could he stand there, pretending everything was normal when I knew the truth now? But I said nothing. I forced a smile, kissed him on the cheek as I always did, and went about my morning routine as if everything was fine. I had to gather my thoughts. I needed to stay calm. It wasn't until the afternoon that I finally found my voice. He left for work, as usual, with that same hurried pace, grabbing his things, giving me a quick wave goodbye. But this time, I didn't let it slide. As soon as the door closed behind him, I grabbed my phone and started searching. I needed to know who Sophie was. It didn't take long to find a social media profile under her name. She was younger than me, much younger, maybe in her late 20s, and beautiful. Her posts were filled with pictures of her and a man I didn't recognize, a man with a smile that looked too familiar. My stomach turned as I realized it was him, my husband, in all these photos. There they were, smiling together at a beach, enjoying dinners, holding hands. They had a life together, and I had been living in the dark. I felt a knot tighten in my chest. This wasn't just an affair. It was something deeper, something long-standing. He had been hiding this from me for months, maybe even longer. The realization hit me like a punch to the gut, and I felt dizzy. I needed to confront him, but how? He was always so careful, so clever at covering his tracks. But now I had everything. I had the evidence. I knew exactly who she was, what they'd been doing. The only question left was how to get him to admit it. The evening came, and he walked through the door looking the same as always, but I wasn't going to let him slip past me this time. As he set his briefcase down, I turned to face him. My voice was steady, though my heart raced with anticipation. "Who is Sophie?" I asked, my eyes never leaving his. For a moment, he froze. The color drained from his face, but only for a split second. His mouth opened, but no words came out. I could see him scrambling for something to say, some excuse, some lie to cover his tracks. But I wasn't going to let him. I already knew the truth. His eyes shifted nervously, his hand reaching for his phone as if he could somehow erase the evidence. But it was too late. I had already seen everything. I had already connected the dots. "Sophie, it's not what you think," he stammered, his voice faltering. I raised my hand to stop him. I wasn't interested in his lies anymore. I had heard enough. "Don't even try. I know everything. The phone, the messages, the pictures. You've been lying to me for months. Don't you dare tell me it's not what I think." His face twisted with guilt, but there was still a flicker of defiance in his eyes. "I never wanted you to find out like this," he said, his voice low and strained. I stepped closer, not giving him an inch. "Then why did you do it?" I asked, my voice shaking now with anger. "Why did you betray me like this? I've been nothing but loyal to you, and this is how you repay me? With lies and secrets?" He sighed, his shoulders slumping, as if the weight of everything had finally caught up to him. "I didn't want to hurt you, Margaret. I really didn't, but I got lost. And Sophie, she understood me in ways you didn't." His words were like daggers, each one cutting deeper than the last. "Understood you? You don't get to blame me for your mistakes. I was here, supporting you. I gave you everything, and you took it all for granted." I took a step back, my mind reeling with the realization of how much he had taken from me. It wasn't just his betrayal, it was everything he had done while pretending to love me. I wasn't sure how much longer I could stand here, listening to him justify his actions, but I couldn't walk away yet. I needed more. I needed to hear him say it, admit the truth, admit everything. I want the truth now, I said, my voice firm, no longer hiding the pain that had taken root in my chest. No more excuses, no more lies. Tell me everything. He hesitated for a moment, his eyes darting around the room as if searching for an escape. But there was none. I had cornered him. His silence spoke louder than any words could. The weight of the truth hung between us, thick and suffocating. Finally he sighed, the deep sound of regret escaping him. His eyes fell to the floor, and for the first time, I saw the cracks in his carefully constructed facade. I didn't mean for it to happen, Margaret, he started, his voice low, as though he were confessing to something he could never take back. It started with a few casual conversations at work. You know how things are? Long hours, too much time spent in the office, and one thing led to another. He paused, and I could hear his heartbeat pounding in the silence. He wasn't looking at me now. Instead, his gaze was fixed on the ground, like he couldn't bear to meet my eyes. And then, it became more than just talking, he continued, his words stumbling out, betraying his attempt to downplay what had been a full-blown affair. She listened to me, Margaret. She made me feel like I mattered again, like I wasn't just, a husband and father who had to live up to expectations. She made me feel alive. I stood there, frozen, my heart twisting with each word. Every time he spoke, he made it sound like I was the problem, like it was my fault for not being there enough, for not understanding him. He painted me as the cold, distant wife while glorifying Sophie as his emotional savior. It was all too much. I could feel the anger rising in me, but I fought to keep it in check. I had to hear it all. I needed to know just how far he'd gone. "And you think that justifies it?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper, but filled with so much rage I could hardly contain it. "You think that makes it okay to destroy everything we built? To throw away a 30-year marriage because you were bored?" He flinched at my words but didn't answer immediately. He shifted uncomfortably, running a hand through his hair. "It's not that simple. You don't understand, Margaret. You haven't been happy either. We've been drifting apart for years. We hardly talk anymore. I don't even remember the last time we connected." His words cut deeper than I expected, like salt in an open wound. I wanted to scream at him, to tell him how unfair it was to blame me for everything that went wrong. But instead, I stood still, forcing myself to listen. "I tried to make it work. I really did," he went on, his voice thick with guilt now. "But it was too late. The damage had been done. But Sophie, she made me feel wanted, Margaret. She made me feel like I wasn't invisible." I wanted to shout that he was wrong, that I had always been there, loving him, supporting him, that everything he was saying was just an excuse. But the words stuck in my throat. The truth was, he had already made his decision. He had already chosen her, and nothing I could say would change that now. The man I had loved for decades wasn't the same anymore. This person, this stranger standing before me, had betrayed me in ways I couldn't even begin to comprehend. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. "And what about me? What about our family, our home?" My voice trembled, but I didn't let him see my tears. "Did none of that matter to you?" He lifted his head, finally meeting my eyes, but there was no regret in his gaze. There was only the cold, harsh reality of his choices. "I never meant to hurt you, but you're right. I've hurt you more than I can ever fix. I never thought it would go this far. I thought I could manage it, keep it a secret, but I can't anymore." His words hit me like a slap. He wasn't sorry for the affair itself. He was sorry he got caught. There was no remorse for the pain he had caused me, for the years of loyalty and devotion I had given him. He wasn't sorry for the lies he had spun or the future he had destroyed. He was only sorry that the illusion had come crumbling down. I turned away, my body shaking with the weight of everything he had just confessed. "I want you to leave," I said quietly, the words feeling heavier than anything I'd ever said to him in all these years. My voice broke slightly, but I held my ground. I can't do this anymore. I can't be with someone who doesn't respect me, who doesn't value what we had. His face went pale, his lips trembling as if he wanted to argue, to beg me to stay. But I didn't give him the chance. I knew there was nothing left to say, nothing he could say that would ever make this right. "I'm done," I said, turning back to him. "You can go. Just leave." He stood there, motionless, as if my words had struck him dumb. The air between us grew thick, filled with the weight of everything that had been unsaid for so long. For a moment, neither of us moved, and the silence in the room felt deafening. I could see him processing what I had just said, perhaps for the first time realizing the finality of it. The house we built together, the life we shared, was crumbling, and he was powerless to stop it. But there was no sympathy in my heart for him anymore. I had given him every ounce of my love, my trust, and this was how he repaid me. This was how he treated me. After what seemed like an eternity, he took a shaky breath. His voice came out in a whisper. "Margaret, please." His voice broke, and I could see the hint of desperation flicker in his eyes. "I know I've made a mistake. I've ruined everything. I'm so sorry. Please don't do this. Let's fix it. I'll do whatever it takes." I didn't respond right away. I just looked at him, my emotions tangled between anger, hurt, and something else, something I couldn't quite place. But I wasn't ready to listen to his apologies anymore. His words felt empty, like the hollow promises he had made to me over the years. Every "I'm sorry" felt like a broken record, and the longer I listened, the more I realized how meaningless it all was. I took a deep breath and looked him straight in the eye. "No," I said firmly, my voice steady, despite the storm brewing inside me. "You don't get to fix this. You've had your chances. You had years to be honest with me. You had years to treat me with respect. But instead, you chose to lie, to sneak around behind my back, and to betray me. You've made your choices, and now you'll have to live with them." I could see the guilt in his eyes, the regret flooding his face, but it didn't change anything. His tears, his pleading, it all felt like manipulation now. He had chosen her. He had chosen the lies. And now he was trying to come back to me, expecting everything to be fixed with a few words of remorse. But I wasn't falling for it anymore. I turned away from him, walking to the window as I let out a slow breath, trying to calm the whirlwind of emotions inside. The pain was still there, gnawing at me, but there was something else too, something that had been building inside me for years, something I had neglected to listen to. It was the voice of my own strength, the voice that told me I deserved better. I had spent so much time giving to him, to us, that I had lost myself along the way. But now it was time to find me again. "I can't even look at you right now," I said quietly, my back still turned to him. "You need to leave. You've had your chance. You've broken me enough." For a long moment, I could hear him shuffling behind me, but I refused to turn around. I could feel the weight of his presence still in the room, but it no longer mattered. His silence spoke volumes, and I knew he understood that this was it. There was no coming back from this. The trust was gone, and with it, everything else. Finally, I heard his footsteps fade as he left the room. I didn't turn to watch him go. There was nothing left to see. He was no longer the man I had spent decades with. He was just a stranger now, someone who had taken everything I had to give and discarded it without a second thought. I stood there for a long time, the quiet of the house swallowing me whole. The weight of everything still felt heavy, but something had shifted inside me. I didn't need him anymore. I had spent too long letting his actions define my happiness, my worth. It was time to take that back. I glanced at the phone again, the one that had started this whole nightmare. It had given me the truth, but it also gave me the strength to make the hardest decision of my life. I wasn't just a victim here. I was a woman who had given her all, and I had the right to take it back. I didn't need him. I never had. With a deep, steadying breath, I made the first decision that felt right in years. I was going to let go. And it wasn't going to be easy, but I was finally ready to reclaim my life, my own life. As the days passed, the house felt strangely quiet. For years, it had been filled with the hum of our shared life, morning coffee, the sound of his footsteps as he came and went, the casual chatter about our days. Now it was just me, alone. And though it should have felt empty, it didn't. It felt like a weight had been lifted. I didn't know what to expect after asking him to leave, but the silence brought a strange sense of clarity. It was as if the chaos in my mind had finally settled, allowing me to see things more clearly than I had in years. I spent the next few days going through the motions, handling practical matters, changing the locks, sorting through his things, packing up his clothes. Every little task felt like a small victory, a quiet act of reclaiming my independence. But with each item I packed away, a sense of loss lingered. Not for him. No, I had lost something far more important: trust. I had trusted him with my heart, and he had shattered it. But that wasn't the hardest part. The hardest part was facing the reality that I had ignored all the warning signs for so long. I had chosen to overlook the cracks in our marriage, telling myself everything would be okay, that it was just a phase, but it wasn't. It was betrayal, plain and simple. The hardest thing, though, was the guilt, a quiet, insidious thing that crept in when I least expected it. The what-ifs started to surface. What if I had been more attentive? What if I had tried harder to understand him? What if this was somehow my fault? These thoughts gnawed at me, and for a moment I almost let them consume me. But then I remembered the truth that I had been faithful, I had been loving, and I had given everything I could. It wasn't my fault that he chose to betray me. I hadn't caused this. He had. I sat down one afternoon, my hands resting on the table as I stared at the phone he had left behind. Part of me wanted to smash it, to destroy everything that reminded me of his lies. But I didn't. Instead, I picked it up slowly and stared at the screen. The messages from Sophie were still there, like ghosts haunting my thoughts. The images of their life together, of him pretending to be the man I thought I knew, twisted something inside me. But I didn't delete them. I didn't want to erase the truth. It wasn't about revenge. It was about understanding, and I needed to understand. I knew I had to move on, that I couldn't dwell in the past forever, but something in me still wanted answers. I wanted to know how deep his lies went, how long this had been going on, and what else he was hiding. It wasn't just about punishing him anymore. It was about closure. I needed to know everything so I could finally let go without any lingering doubts. So I decided to confront him one last time, but this time it would be on my terms. I didn't care if he begged or cried. I had no intention of forgiving him. I needed to reclaim my dignity, my peace. He owed me that much. I reached for my phone, dialing his number. It rang once, twice before he picked up. "Margaret," he said, his voice low and unsure. "Please, can we talk?" I took a deep breath. "No," I replied, my voice steady. "I don't need to talk to you anymore, but there's something I need from you." "What's that?" he asked, his voice tight with tension. "I need you to tell me everything. No more lies, no more excuses. I want the truth, and I want it now." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. I could hear him breathing, his mind working, probably trying to come up with something that would make this all go away. But there was no getting out of this. I had already seen the truth. I just needed him to admit it. I I don't know what to say, he stammered. I'm sorry, Margaret. I know I've hurt you, and I regret it. But it wasn't just about Sophie. It's— No, I interrupted, my voice firm. I'm done with the apologies. I need the truth. Everything. All of it. How long has this been going on? What else are you hiding from me? He was silent for a long moment. I could hear his breath catch in his throat, the weight of his own guilt suffocating him. Finally he spoke, his voice barely a whisper. It started 3 years ago, he admitted, the words slow and heavy. It wasn't just an affair. It was— I don't know. I just felt lost, Margaret. I felt like I was suffocating. And Sophie was there. She made me feel like I mattered again. The truth hung in the air between us, raw and ugly. 3 years. That was how long he had been lying to me, betraying me. It wasn't a mistake. It was a choice. And in that moment, I knew there was nothing he could say that would ever make this right. Thank you for telling me, I said quietly, the calm in my voice betraying the storm inside me. Now I want you to leave me alone. I don't need any more of your lies. We're done. For good. I hung up the phone, the finality of it echoing in my mind. This was it. There would be no more waiting for him to come back, no more false hopes of reconciliation. It was over. I was done. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I could breathe again. The next few days felt like a blur. I was caught in a whirlwind of emotions, trying to make sense of the life I had built and the pieces of myself that had been lost along the way. I felt like I had been living in a fog for so long, blind to the truth, that now, with everything laid bare, the clarity was almost overwhelming. I had spent so much time caring for him, trying to make our marriage work, and yet it had all been a lie. I couldn't shake the feeling that I had wasted so much of myself on someone who didn't value me, didn't love me the way I deserved. But as the days passed, I began to feel something else, something that had been buried beneath years of sacrifice and disappointment. Strength. For the first time in years, I wasn't living for someone else. I wasn't trying to hold together a marriage that had already fallen apart. I was living for me, and it felt freeing. It was like I could finally take a deep breath without the weight of his secrets bearing down on me. I started doing things for myself. I took long walks in the park, enjoying the quiet and the fresh air. I found myself smiling again, not because I was happy about what had happened, but because I was finally allowing myself to feel something other than pain. I was learning how to be alone, and for the first time I wasn't afraid of it. I was beginning to realize that I didn't need him. I had spent so many years believing that my worth was tied to being a wife, a mother, that I had forgotten what it meant to just be me. One evening, as I was sitting at the kitchen table, sipping my tea and staring out the window, the phone rang. I had been expecting it. His number had appeared on the caller ID several times since our conversation. He had been calling nonstop, sending texts apologizing, begging for another chance. But I wasn't interested in his apologies anymore. I let the phone ring for a while, feeling the urge to pick it up and end it all with one final conversation. I imagined telling him how much he had hurt me, how betrayed I felt. But in the end, I knew it wouldn't change anything. He wouldn't be able to take back the years of lies, the promises broken, the trust shattered. No amount of begging could undo the damage he had done. I picked up the phone and stared at it for a moment, my finger hovering over the decline button. The urge to cut him off completely surged through me. So I did. I pressed the button and silenced the call just as I had done with his constant texts. It felt like a small victory, a simple act of control that reminded me of the power I still had over my own life. I knew this wasn't going to be easy. There would be moments when I missed the idea of him, the version of him I had imagined in my mind, the loving husband, the man who was supposed to be my partner. But the reality was, he was none of those things. He was a liar, a cheater, and he had taken more from me than I ever should have allowed. The next morning, as I walked down the street to pick up my morning coffee, I caught a glimpse of myself in the reflection of a store window. For the first time, I really saw myself. I was still here. I was still standing, and I was going to be okay. I didn't need him. I had myself, and that was enough. As I sipped my coffee, I made a decision. I wasn't going to let this define me. I wasn't going to spend my days dwelling on the past, on the lies he had told me. I was going to move forward, step by step, day by day. It wasn't going to be easy, but I wasn't afraid anymore. I had lived for him for far too long. Now it was time to live for me. I spent the next week rearranging my life, making small changes that gave me a sense of control. I started making plans, things I had put off for years. I signed up for a painting class I'd always wanted to try, signed up for yoga to help calm my mind. I didn't care what people thought or how they saw me. I was done living for the approval of others. I was living for myself. And as I took each step, I felt the pieces of me that had been broken slowly falling back into place. It wasn't going to be an easy road, but I knew now that I didn't need anyone to complete me. I was enough on my own. I was whole, and for the first time in a long time, I was beginning to feel free. The weeks that followed were both challenging and liberating. As much as I had started to reclaim parts of myself, there were still moments of doubt, moments when I questioned if I had done the right thing. I spent a lot of time thinking about our life together, the years we had spent building a family, the vacations, the holidays, the quiet moments. Those memories didn't just disappear, and at times they would hit me when I least expected it. A song playing on the radio, a photograph on the wall, even the sound of a car in the driveway would send a rush of emotions flooding through me, but then I would remind myself, he had made his choice. He had chosen her. He had chosen the lies, and now I had to choose myself. I kept busy. I focused on work, on my new hobbies, on the things that had always been pushed to the side while I had been caught up in the demands of marriage and family life. I went to the painting classes, attended the yoga sessions, and even started reading again, something I had loved but never had time for. It was the little things, these small shifts in my daily life that started to add up. I began to see the woman I used to be, the one who didn't need anyone to complete her, the one who could stand on her own 2 feet and build a life filled with purpose and meaning. And then, just when I thought I was getting my footing, he showed up again. It was a Sunday afternoon when the doorbell rang. I had just finished a relaxing afternoon, reading in my favorite chair by the window, when I heard the familiar chime. My first instinct was to ignore it, to pretend I hadn't heard. But something in me told me I had to face him. I stood up, walked slowly to the door, and opened it. There he was, standing on the doorstep, looking like a man who had been through hell. His face was drawn, his eyes tired, and he looked like he hadn't slept in days. For a moment, I almost felt pity for him. But that feeling passed quickly, replaced by the cold, hard truth of what he had done to me. "Maggie," he said, his voice hoarse, "I know I don't deserve this, but please, can we talk?" I stood there silent, looking at him. The man who had once been my partner, the father of my children, the person I had trusted more than anyone. But now he was just a stranger who had betrayed me in the worst way possible. "What is there to talk about?" I finally said, my voice steady but distant. "You've had your chances, Mark. I've given you everything, and you threw it all away." "I know," he said, his voice breaking. "I know I can't undo what I've done, but I can't live with myself knowing I hurt you like this. I've lost everything, Maggie. My marriage, my family, my dignity. I don't know how to fix it, but I want to try. I want to make things right." His words were laced with desperation, but I wasn't moved. Not anymore. I had spent too long caring about making things right for us, when he had never done the same for me. I had sacrificed so much of myself for this marriage, only to watch him destroy it with his lies and deceit. "I don't need you to fix anything," I said, my voice cold and final. "What I need is to move on, and I can't do that with you still in my life, still trying to make things right on your terms." His face fell, and for a moment I thought he might crumble under the weight of the truth, but he didn't. He just stood there, looking at me with the kind of regret that meant nothing anymore. He had broken me once, and I wasn't going to let him do it again. "I'm sorry, Maggie. I really am," he whispered, the apology sounding more like an excuse than a genuine plea. I nodded slowly, not because I accepted his apology, but because it was time to close this chapter, time to shut the door on him for good. "I know you are," I said softly, "but I can't keep living in the past, Mark. I can't keep holding on to what's already been lost. You don't get to be a part of my future anymore." I stepped back, slowly closing the door in his face, and for the first time in a long time, I felt a sense of peace. The finality of it, the closure, settled over me like a warm blanket. It wasn't about hating him or holding on to the anger. It was about letting go, about choosing myself. He knocked a few times after that, but I never opened the door again. It wasn't because I was angry. It was because I knew that I deserved better than the version of him that had abandoned me. I didn't need him to validate my worth. I had spent so many years looking for approval from him, and now I realized that approval had to come from within. I spent the evening alone, reflecting on everything that had happened. I didn't feel sorry for myself. I didn't feel broken anymore. I was starting to see myself in a new light. I was stronger than I had given myself credit for. The woman who had been betrayed, who had been discarded, was no longer a victim. She was someone who had survived, someone who had learned how to let go and move on. And for the first time, I was excited for what came next. The following weeks became a journey of rediscovery. For the first time in what felt like forever, I wasn't constantly worrying about him, or wondering where he was or what he was doing. His absence, while painful at first, began to feel like freedom. It wasn't just that I didn't have to carry the burden of his deceit anymore. I had started to realize that I didn't need him to define who I was. I was Margaret, and I was enough on my own. I immersed myself in the things I loved. I joined a local art gallery to volunteer, something I had always wanted to do but had never found the time for. The people there were kind, welcoming, and the atmosphere was inspiring. I started to feel like my old self again, the version of me before marriage, before the years of sacrifice. I was rediscovering my own passions, my own voice, but even as I embraced my newfound freedom, I couldn't help but wonder how everything had gone so wrong. I wasn't naive enough to think I hadn't played a part in it. There were moments, years even, where I had allowed myself to get lost in trying to keep everything together, in pleasing him, in being the perfect wife. I had sacrificed pieces of myself along the way, thinking that's what I had to do to make our marriage work. In the end, I had sacrificed everything, only for him to betray me. One evening, after a long day of volunteering, I sat in my favorite chair, the soft glow of the lamp casting a warm light over the room. The peace I had begun to feel started to feel more like a lingering calm before a storm. I had been avoiding something I knew I needed to face, the truth about what had happened. I had let go of him, but I hadn't yet fully let go of the anger, the hurt. I had put up walls to protect myself, but I couldn't keep hiding from it forever. I grabbed my phone, unlocked it, and scrolled to the messages he had sent. He had been relentless, calling, texting, pleading for forgiveness, but I couldn't bring myself to respond. I didn't need to hear more of his apologies. They felt empty now, like words without meaning. I didn't want him to take up any more space in my head, in my life. But there was something else, something I hadn't yet faced. As I scrolled through the messages, one stood out. It was a text he had sent just a few days ago, the last one before I had blocked his number. He had written, "I know what I've done, and I don't expect you to forgive me. But I just want you to know you were always the best part of my life. I never meant to hurt you. I'm so sorry for everything." I stared at it for a long time. His words stung, but they didn't hurt the way they used to. They were just words now. Words from a man who couldn't undo the damage he had caused, no matter how many times he apologized. Words from a man who had failed me and in turn failed himself. I exhaled slowly, setting the phone down on the table. I didn't need to respond. I didn't need to carry this anymore. It was time to let go of the last piece of him that still lingered in my heart. It wasn't about closure anymore. It wasn't about finding answers. It was about healing. I had done enough for him, enough for the both of us. Now it was time to do something for me. I walked over to the window, looking out at the street below. The sun had just begun to set, casting the sky in hues of orange and pink. It was beautiful, peaceful, and I realized that this was my life now. Peaceful, mine and mine alone. There would be days ahead when I would still miss the version of him I thought I knew, the one who had promised me a future we had built together. But I couldn't live in that version anymore. I couldn't keep waiting for someone who had already made it clear they weren't going to show up for me. I was enough on my own. I had always been enough. I didn't need him. The thought settled over me like a warm blanket, comforting me. I was done looking back. It was time to look forward, to focus on what lay ahead. I didn't know exactly what that would look like, but for the first time in years, I was excited to find out. I took a deep breath and smiled to myself. The future was mine to create now, and I was ready. As the weeks turned into months, I continued to find strength in the small, everyday things that I had once taken for granted. The evenings spent at the gallery, the quiet moments in my own home, and the simple joy of waking up each morning without the weight of his lies on my shoulders. Life, while still a bit uncertain at times, felt lighter. I had spent so much of my life in the shadows of a marriage that was built on half-truths and broken promises. Now I was stepping into the light, reclaiming my own space in the world. I started making new plans for myself. I enrolled in a few cooking classes, something I had always been curious about but never had the time for. It felt good to explore new passions, to challenge myself in ways I hadn't in years. I also reconnected with old friends, people I had distanced myself from over the years, thinking I had to put all my attention on my marriage. I invited them over for dinners, went out for coffee, and laughed in ways that I hadn't in far too long. One night, after a long day of work and classes, I sat in the living room with a glass of wine, thinking about how far I had come. A year ago, I couldn't have imagined this. A year ago, I would have been wrapped up in the chaos of trying to fix something that was beyond saving. But now, here I was, standing strong and independent, surrounded by people who genuinely cared for me. It wasn't that I had forgotten about what happened. It was that I had learned to live with it, to not let it define me anymore. The betrayal still hurt at times, but it wasn't the focus of my life anymore. I was moving forward, creating a new story for myself, one that didn't revolve around a man who had broken my heart. Then, just as I was starting to feel truly free, I received a letter. At first, I wasn't sure who it was from. It was neatly addressed to me, and the handwriting looked familiar, but I couldn't place it right away. As I opened the envelope, my heart skipped a beat. It was from my ex-husband. The letter was short, but the words were clear. He was asking for one last chance. He was deeply sorry for everything, regretted his actions, and wanted to make amends. He wrote about how he had changed, how he had been seeing a therapist, and how he had come to realize how much he had lost. But most of all, he wanted me to know that he missed me, and he wanted to try to rebuild what we had, even if it meant starting over from scratch. I sat there holding the letter, my mind racing. After everything, after all the pain, all the lies, was I really ready to open that door again? Could I really go back to someone who had hurt me so deeply? For a long time, I just sat there, the letter in my hands, trying to make sense of it. It was tempting to think about what it might have been like if he had come to me sooner, if he had shown this level of vulnerability before everything fell apart. But deep down, I knew I couldn't go back. I had spent too long forgiving him for things that he had never truly apologized for. I had tried to make excuses for him to justify his behavior, but now I realized that it wasn't about fixing him. It was about fixing me. I took a deep breath and put the letter down on the table. I wasn't angry. I wasn't hurt. I was just done. I had given him enough chances, enough of my time and energy, and now I had to focus on my own future. The past couldn't be rewritten, no matter how much he wished it could. It wasn't that I didn't care about him. I did, in a way. He had been my partner for many years, and we had shared a life together. But I was no longer that woman, the one who lived in the shadow of his mistakes, the one who sacrificed her own happiness for the sake of a marriage that was never going to work. The woman I had become was stronger, wiser, and more certain of what she wanted. And I wasn't going to throw away everything I had worked for just to go back to something that had hurt me. I didn't need him to complete me. I had finally learned to complete myself. The next day, I made the decision. I didn't respond to his letter. I didn't need to. I had already made my choice. I folded the letter neatly and placed it in a drawer where it would stay. Just another reminder of the past I was no longer living in. I was ready to move forward, to embrace whatever came next, knowing that this time I was choosing me. The world was wide open, and for the first time in years, I felt like I was finally living for myself. A few months later, I was standing in the middle of an art exhibit, surrounded by people admiring the work. It was my first solo showing, and as I looked around at the paintings I had spent months creating, I felt a deep sense of pride and accomplishment. It wasn't just the art itself, it was what it represented. This was my life now. These paintings were pieces of my soul, poured out on canvas during moments of peace, pain, joy, and reflection. They were the result of years of rediscovery, a way for me to express what I had been through and what I had learned. The gallery owner came over with a smile, her eyes shining with excitement. "Margaret, your work is incredible. People are really connecting with it. There's something so raw, so real about it. I think this is just the beginning for you." Her words filled me with a sense of warmth. It had been a long time since I felt like I was truly on the right path, and now, standing here, watching people admire my work, I knew I had made the right choice. This wasn't just about selling art or gaining recognition, it was about finding my voice again, reclaiming my sense of self. It was about healing. I had met so many wonderful people since I'd started working at the gallery, and I had made a few close friends who shared my passions. One of them, Laura, was a fellow artist who had become one of my greatest supporters. She had invited me out to lunch that afternoon, and as we sat across from each other, she asked, "So, are you ever going to tell me how you really did it?" I raised an eyebrow, a small smile tugging at the corners of my lips. "How I did what?" She leaned forward, her eyes sparkling with curiosity. "How you managed to get through everything. The divorce, the betrayal, the heartbreak. You've come so far. What's your secret?" I took a deep breath, thinking for a moment. It wasn't something I talked about often. I didn't want to dwell on the past anymore. But Laura had been there for me, and there was something about her question that made me feel ready to finally speak my truth. "There's no secret," I said, my voice steady but soft. "I think I just realized that I couldn't keep living in the shadow of what happened. I couldn't keep allowing someone else's choices to define me. I had to let go of the anger and the hurt because holding on to it only kept me stuck. I had to forgive myself for the things I couldn't control, and most importantly, I had to learn to live for me." Laura nodded thoughtfully. That's powerful. I can see it in your work, your art. It's like you're finally free. I smiled at that because for the first time in years, I truly felt free. I had spent so much time trying to make everything work, trying to fix a broken relationship that I had ignored the most important person, myself. But now I was free. Free from the chains of the past, free from the expectations of others. And I was finally doing something I loved, something that felt right for me. As the conversation drifted to other topics, I couldn't help but reflect on how far I had come. It hadn't been an easy road. There had been moments when I felt lost, when I didn't know if I would ever recover from the betrayal. But now I was thriving. I had built a new life, one where I was in control, one where my happiness didn't depend on someone else's actions. It was all mine. That evening, after Laura and I parted ways, I walked back to my apartment, the cool air brushing against my skin as I gazed up at the city lights. There was a peace in my heart now, a calm that had replaced the chaos and the fear. I had walked through the storm, and I had come out stronger on the other side. I thought about my ex-husband, how he had once been the center of my world, and I thought about how, just a few months ago, I had been afraid of losing myself in the wake of our divorce. But now I saw that the life I had been too afraid to live was waiting for me all along. I didn't need him. I didn't need anyone to validate me. I was enough, just as I was. And in that moment, under the glow of the streetlights, I knew I was finally exactly where I needed to be. There was a whole world ahead of me, full of possibilities, and I was ready to embrace it. As the months went by, I settled into a rhythm I had never known before. My life was no longer defined by the shadows of my past, and for the first time, I felt like I was living for myself, without the weight of someone else's expectations or mistakes. My days were filled with purpose, morning walks through the park, afternoons spent at the gallery, evenings working on my art, and weekends spent catching up with friends. The chaos that once filled my home had been replaced by a peaceful solitude I had come to cherish. I began to make new dreams for myself, dreams that didn't involve compromise or keeping the peace for the sake of a relationship. I had grown to understand that I didn't have to change who I was to make someone else happy. I could still be kind, loving, and compassionate, but I also had to be strong, independent, and true to myself. One afternoon, as I worked on a new painting in my studio, I received a call from my lawyer. My heart skipped a beat, but I quickly brushed aside the brief panic that rose within me. I had been expecting this call for a while now, but still, a part of me dreaded it. My lawyer had been handling the legal process regarding the house and the assets we had built together. I had been determined to reclaim what was mine, and now the final stage of the process was about to begin. "Margaret, we're ready," my lawyer said, her voice calm but firm. "The papers are all in order. We're ready to proceed with the transfer of the house." I sat up straighter, feeling a wave of emotion surge through me. It wasn't just about the house. It was about reclaiming my dignity, my life, and everything that had once been taken from me. It was a symbol of my new beginning. "Thank you," I said softly, my voice thick with emotion. "It's finally over, isn't it?" "Yes, Margaret, it's finally over." After the call ended, I sat in silence for a few moments, taking in the weight of what was happening. I had worked so hard to get here, to take back what had always been mine. I had fought for my independence, and now it was truly mine. I didn't have to share my life or my future with anyone who didn't value me. That evening, after I had finished for the day at the gallery, I took a walk through the neighborhood, the air crisp with the onset of fall. I had spent so many years thinking I couldn't make it on my own, but now, as I walked through the streets of my city, I realized I had never been more alive. I had rebuilt myself from the ground up, and while the road had been long and painful, it had led me to a place where I could finally be at peace with myself. I thought about my children, about the life I had given them, and about the sacrifices I had made for them. I thought about how my ex-husband's choices had affected them too, and how they had seen the pain in my eyes. But I also knew that this new chapter was one I could share with them. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was thriving, and that was a lesson I hoped they would carry with them. When I arrived back home, I sat on the couch sipping my tea, reflecting on how much I had changed. I realized that while the past would always be a part of me, it no longer had control over my future. I was free. I was whole. And I was exactly where I needed to be. There were still moments of uncertainty, of course. Life was never perfect. But for the first time, I understood that I didn't need everything to be perfect to be happy. I had found happiness in my own skin, in my own company. I had found peace in being true to myself. And most importantly, I had learned that the only approval I needed was my own. I knew that there would be challenges ahead, but now I felt equipped to face them. I had survived the worst, and now I was ready for whatever came next. I smiled to myself, feeling a quiet satisfaction. The world was wide open, and I was ready to take it on, one step at a time. The months that followed felt like the final chapter of a story I had been writing without even realizing it. Each day I added a little more to the narrative of my life, building it from the ground up. It wasn't just about moving on from the betrayal anymore. It was about creating a life that was uniquely mine. I had learned the hard way that nothing in this world was guaranteed, but one thing I now knew for sure was that I could stand on my own 2 feet. I had done it before, and I could do it again. One of the first things I did after everything was finalized, the divorce, the legal settlements, the house transfer, was take a trip. A real one, not a rushed weekend getaway or a quick vacation, but a trip to a place I had always dreamed of visiting. It was something I had put off for years, telling myself that there would always be a better time, a more convenient time. But I had learned that there was no such thing as the perfect moment, and if I kept waiting for it, I would miss out on the things that truly mattered. I chose to visit Paris. It was everything I had ever imagined: romantic, charming, and full of history. The first day I arrived, I walked along the Seine River, letting the gentle breeze whip through my hair as I took in the beauty around me. I remember standing there on the bridge, looking out over the water and feeling something I hadn't felt in years: hope. I wasn't just walking through the streets of Paris. I was walking through the streets of my own future, one that I could create for myself without anyone else's influence. As I strolled through the streets, I found myself stopping at little cafes, enjoying pastries and sipping coffee as I watched the world go by. I visited the Louvre, not to rush through the galleries, but to take my time, to let the art wash over me and fill my soul. I sat in the gardens at the Musée d'Orsay and let myself relax, truly relax for the first time in so long. There was something so freeing about being in a place where no one knew me, where I could just be me in all my messy, imperfect glory. I had spent so many years thinking that my worth was tied to being someone's wife, someone's partner, someone's caretaker. But standing there in the middle of Paris, I realized that my worth was intrinsic. I didn't need anyone to tell me who I was. I had already figured it out. I spent a week in Paris, letting the city work its magic on me. Each day I felt a little more like myself. I wasn't just living in the past anymore. I was living for today. I was living for what came next, not what had been. The truth was, I was never going to forget the pain. I wasn't going to erase the years of hurt, betrayal, and lost time. But I didn't need to. I had come to accept it. It was a part of my story, yes, but it wasn't the whole story. The whole story was still unfolding, and I was the one writing it. When I returned home, things felt different. I had taken that trip to remind myself that there was more to life than the pain I had experienced. But it wasn't just about escaping my reality. It was about facing it head on and realizing that I was capable of so much more than I had ever given myself credit for. I didn't need to hide from the past anymore. I had survived it, and now I could use the lessons I had learned to build a better, stronger version of myself. I threw myself into my art even more, taking on new projects, working on larger canvases, experimenting with colors and techniques I had never dared to try before. The gallery where I had worked had given me a solid platform, but now I was being recognized on my own. My work was being showcased in multiple galleries across the city, and I was starting to gain a reputation as someone who wasn't just a survivor, but a force to be reckoned with. I also found myself slowly but surely reconnecting with my children. After everything, they had been hurt by the fallout, but they had seen the strength in me that they hadn't expected. They had watched me build myself back up, and over time they came to understand that I wasn't just their mother. I was a woman in my own right, with dreams, passions, and a life to live. We spent weekends together, laughing over old family stories, making new memories, and most importantly, rebuilding our relationship. It wasn't perfect, but we were getting there. And then, one day, I received a letter, a legal one. At first, my heart dropped. I thought it was going to be another one of his attempts to reopen old wounds, to drag me back into the past. But when I opened it, I was surprised. It wasn't from my ex-husband, but from the attorney who had represented me in the divorce proceedings. Inside the envelope was a certified check and a letter explaining that my ex-husband had decided to transfer the remaining portion of the house's equity to me. Apparently, he had come to realize that despite everything, I had put in more than enough into that home, and he was settling the final portion of our financial agreement. At first, I wasn't sure how to feel about it. After all, it had been years since I had even thought about him in this context. But then I realized something. This wasn't just about the money, it was a final acknowledgement, a recognition of the work I had put in. It was his way of saying that, despite everything, I deserved it. And for once, it felt like I had received something that wasn't taken from me. It was something I had earned on my own terms. I didn't need his money, but I accepted it, not because I wanted revenge or because I needed closure, but because I realized that I had spent so long fighting for my independence and self-respect. This was just a final piece of that puzzle, a way for me to walk away from the past without any loose ends. The truth was, I was finally free, free from the anger, free from the hurt, free from the man who had once been my everything but had turned out to be the person who tried to tear me down. I wasn't bitter about it anymore. I had accepted what happened, forgiven him, not for his sake, but for my own peace, and now I was ready for whatever came next. I could see the future stretching out before me, a canvas untouched, waiting to be painted. I was no longer the woman who had been defined by her marriage or by the mistakes of others. I was a woman with a future, with dreams, with purpose, and nothing, not even the ghosts of the past, could take that away from me. So I moved forward with open arms, a clear heart, and a spirit that was finally, completely free.